Procurement requirements are extremely important in driving any kind of behavior in the construction industry, especially in the infrastructure sector, where we have often the market is dominated by a small number of public clients. The way that they formulate their procurement requirements are going to shape the incentive structure for investing in any kind of development work in sustainability as well as in other areas for the contractors and for the consultants and the whole industry, everyone which is involved. This said, procurement requirements are not an easy tool to work with because the organizations in construction projects are extremely complex. And in this area that we are talking about, which concerns carbon reduction, there are a lot of processes which are affected and need to be changed in order to arrive at the goals that we have set up. And just because you set up a procurement requirement, it doesn't mean that behavior is going to change, because you have a lot of practical limitations in terms of time, in terms of complexity. We have temporary projects where a lot of people who have not worked together before will start to form their rules for working in this project. And that takes some time, and then you need also to fit in innovations such as carbon reduction in that. And that's not trivial at all. And this means that you can have very large projects, but the possibilities to change, they are limited in any project. So what we see here is that you need to have a long-term perspective. But what we also see is that the belief in procurement requirements and incentives in general is high. One aspect which is generally essential to achieve innovation and improvements in construction projects is collaboration within the supply chain. And then not only the client and the contractor, but also the consultants and the subcontractors and the material suppliers. However, we know that this is not so easily achieved. To establish a functional collaboration, you need appropriate contracts, you need an appropriate procurement, you need to select the right people. But it's important to recognize that collaboration is not easy for individuals and for organizations. Also in this area, there is a need for training, for processes, for knowledge accumulation. And we see that in some countries, they are more advanced in establishing collaborative relationships. And we see that countries where they start to work in this way, they perhaps need a few tries before they get it right, and there is a need for training activities and knowledge building over time. And there are also different prerequisites or conditions. So that if you have, for example, we had Anglian Water in this study, they have a situation where they are able to establish long-term relationships with a supplier network, while in larger one-off projects, the situation is completely different. So that's also something that you need to recognize, that the context determines the business models and the limitations of collaboration. Much of my previous research has been on construction procurement and on innovation and on collaboration and on incentives, the role of incentives in that context. And I think that one thing that we have observed here is that we encounter similar problems when trying to introduce procurement requirements, bonuses, incentives for driving carbon reduction in this sector as we do when we try to introduce any kind of incentive. And a major finding in all studies on construction procurement is that the belief in incentives is very high, but the ability to understand and preview all the processes and all the work that is involved in setting these incentives, following them up, and the risks that they entail for backfiring and getting a behavior that is not functional to what you want to achieve in the end is actually something that you need to consider. So if it's one message, I would say that it's kind of think 2 times before you introduce an incentive in a construction contract.